Welcome to House Beautiful Out Loud. My name's Julia Goodwin, I'm the editor, and I'm with Emma Reynolds, Shadow Housing Minister. Emma is also MP for Wolverhampton North East and joined Parliament in 2010. Good afternoon, Emma.
Good afternoon.
Can we start off by asking what the plans of a future Labour government would be to solve the housing shortage and build enough houses for Britain's 63 million citizens?
Well, it's clear that we're not even building half the number of homes that we need to keep up with demand. We have committed, the next Labour government, should we win the next general election next year, to building at least 200,000 homes a year by 2020. Now, there is no single silver bullet solution that will get us to that point. We think that national government has to take a role of leadership, and there are many things that we think central government needs to do, whether it's making sure that housing is an investment priority for our government, and we're committed to that, but also making sure that the market itself works better. But it also will take leadership from local authorities, and we think that there are some very deep structural problems with the way that the market works, given that it hasn't supplied anywhere near the number of homes we need for the last 3 decades or more, that we need to tackle when we get into government.
In the meantime, it's going to take you some time to get the homes up and running if we do manage to achieve the shortage. I think there's 110,000 homes completed this year, and we reckon we need about 300,000 a year to be built, ideally, to house everybody who would like to have a home. You were talking briefly to me before the podcast started about some ideas that you've got to help this generation rent in the short term. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate on those for our listeners.
Well, firstly, we want to make sure that if you rent in the private rented sector, you get a better deal, that there's more stability for both those who are renting, but also for landlords. And that's why we've looked at the model that they have in Ireland and other European countries about making sure there's longer term tenancies available as the norm, but also that there are higher standards and that there is a ceiling on rent increases. But there are lots of young people out there between the ages of 20 and 34 still living at home, about 1 in 4 apparently, according to the statistics, which is a large number of young people who are living at home with their parents still. And I'm very interested at looking at what we can do to promote a different model of home ownership, a rent to buy model. And I know that there are many young people interested in investing in such a thing. Some of the models are quite complicated. They work in different ways. Maybe we could have a simpler model that is widespread, rather than one model in Sunderland with Gen 2 Housing Association and another model in Brighton. I met a young man who's recently gone into some housing association property and is part renting and part buying. But there's a sort of lack of awareness of what's out there, but there's a great shortage of this kind of housing available to first-time buyers.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about encouraging young adult children onto the property ladder. So we're not talking about a return to decades ago of more council housing en masse or more social housing. You're actually looking at solutions which would enable our younger generation to actually become homeowners.
I think it's really important that young people are able to realise their dream of home ownership. However, I also think it's really important, having grown up for the early part of my childhood in a council flat with my mom, that we do have significant and very decent and high standard social housing as well. These are 2 different parts of the housing sector that we need to improve, that we need to invest in, that we need to have more of. As I say, there's no single solution to the housing crisis. We need lots of new homes in all the different sectors, whether it's social housing, whether it's private homes for sale. And frankly, we need a much better and a better quality private rented sector. We see in Germany that there are pension funds and other institutional investors who have invested in brand new houses or flats that they rent out to people. So we need all of those different things. But yes, I definitely support those young people who want to get on the housing ladder, and we need to do much, much more to enable them to realise their dream of home ownership.
If I can just take you back to the issue of the housing shortage at the moment, one of the issues has been identified as one of the problems is the fact that it's very difficult to release enough land, to get enough land released in order for house builders to build the requisite number of homes. The second problem is the shortage of skills. And a third possible solution is the possible encouragement by government of the self-build market, which is woefully small in the UK compared to the rest of Europe. I mean, that's three big questions, Emma.
Yeah.
Perhaps you'd like to tackle them whichever order you like, and just tell us briefly what your priorities would be.
Well, we are absolutely committed to making sure that more land becomes available for development. We know that we've only built on, less than 10% of land in England, and actually quite a large part of that land is gardens, not houses,
Yes.
Which is a very good thing. But there is certainly enough beautiful countryside out there for us to enjoy our country, but also enough land out there for us to have, to be able to tackle the housing shortage. I just say that because sometimes I get reactions on social media that I want to concrete over the countryside, and there's enough land out there for us to have a wonderful countryside and also to have enough homes. We think that the government has to intervene to make sure that the market works better and that more land comes to forward for development. We also think that local authorities need to take a much more proactive role in assembling land in the same way that they do in some continental countries, such as France, for example. These are some of the proposals that Sir Michael Lyons, in his Housing Commission, is going to be bringing
Well, if I can
forward.
interrupt you there, I think he's also suggested that one of the solutions is actually to make the cities bigger. So to your point about we're not going to spoil the countryside, that one of the solutions that's being talked about that he might put forward is that actually the idea is to grow our cities where the essential infrastructure already exists, and that people should stop resisting that, the NIMBY tendency, not in my backyard, but that actually we should resist the growing conurbations, because often that's the easiest and most efficient solution. Do you have a view on that?
Well, look, I certainly think that making sure that when we invest in infrastructure, we think much more carefully about development as well that goes along with that. When we built HS1, there wasn't really a plan alongside that for housing, and housing is often not considered as infrastructure, bizarrely, whereas in other countries I think it is.
Yes.
So we certainly need much more joined up thinking by government with regard to how we plan our infrastructure. You asked about self-build. Now, I think that self-build is definitely part of the solution, but I think we need to promote more custom build, because I think that is more accessible to people. I think there's this perception out there that self-build is for wealthy people who can afford large plots of land and perhaps have very deep pockets when it comes to the extra building costs that keep getting added on to the kind of bill for their home. And so I do think what we need to look at is promoting custom build, which is obviously a very, very different product.
And also there's an argument that there's a whole market that's not being served, a market of families, young families, who are keen perhaps to move to their second home and would like to build a home that is custom built, that actually they don't have $1 million plus in their pocket, but there is a whole mid-market that we're not serving with custom building and even self-building that perhaps our European neighbours are doing much better.
Absolutely, and I've spoken about, and I know the government have, uttered warm words about this, but I'm very supportive of any initiative that they might bring forward, and this is something we want to look in government, about encouraging local authorities to set up waiting lists for people who want plots for self or custom build. At the moment, the only precise indication of housing need that local authorities have are their social housing waiting lists. Why not also create a waiting list for those who want self-build or custom build homes, and to give the local authority a much better indication of what the demand is for that particular type of housing.
Well, thank you very much, Emma. That brings our discussion to an end. You may have heard the bell tolling while we were discussing. That was actually calling MPs to Parliament for a vote, I believe. Thank you very much for talking to us. Emma Reynolds, Shadow Housing Minister. This is Julia Goodwin with House Beautiful Out Loud signing out. Thank you.